caster who now works for G4. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'll be honest, we had like a bit of a back and forth. I've seen like the email chains. I was like, I'm not quite sure what I'm walking into, but it's probably going to be a good time.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think we're just going to be talking about a bit about like esports, sort of your own experiences. I guess the direction that you want to see esports go into the future. I'm not a super big esports pro, so you're going to be kind of having to, fill me in a little bit on what's been happening. But I guess we can just start, like what got you into esports, and I guess like how did you get into esports? Why did you want to go into it? Let's hear about that.
Yeah, so I think my story is probably pretty common for a lot of Americans getting into esports. It was really kind of the owned into Twitch TV boom that kind of unlocked esports to the next level. Like obviously you have your historic StarCraft and CSGO crew that would be doing the scene back then, but I think esports, especially for the Western market, really took a big turn with things like League of Legends and Riot Games kind of
100%
pumping in a lot more infrastructure into there and showcasing a whole nother level. And of course, I think a lot of that success does come to how streaming markets really opened up, because before esports was really had like a cap put onto it for how many people you could basically fit at like a convention, and then like spread word of mouth through like forum and messaging boards about the convention.
Yeah.
But obviously someone saw like, hey, all of these people are coming out on their weekends to go watch these people play video games on a stage. I bet we can expand on
monetize
that.
Monetize
on it, but allow like a whole different scale of viewership and accessibility into esports. So when I think about like kind of the Western market of esports and how I got into it, I think it really does kind of sit very much into that that streaming owned Twitch.tv boom, because I think that's what really kind of blew the cap off of it, where obviously in like the Korean market you had a very different trajectory with OGN and how the broadcasting rights were actually like much earlier and more mainstream than what we see even in the Western audience today. It's not like ESPN is showing esports all the time. It does happen. I think there is some crossovers with Street Fighter in particular and CSGO on like TNT and things like that. So it happens, but obviously Korea was like on the forefront.
Yeah, when did Korea start doing like getting into esports? Because I remember like when I was younger, when I first started playing League of Legends, like the gaming and everything was really popular in Asia, but not so much so in like the Western sphere. And I mean, I was really into like sort of like the Chinese, Japanese, like RPGs and stuff, and League of Legends too, but it wasn't super popular here. I think I would just get like bullied, or not actually bullied, but people make fun of me for playing League of Legends in high school. And now like so many people are playing League of Legends, like Valorant, other Riot games too. So many people are playing. Do you think like how do you think how did esports develop in Asia, and what do you know like why it was so popular there first?
So there's obviously like better experts than me about like the esports history and the Asian market. But to my understanding, again, it's OGN having broadcasting rights to put it on like mainstream television, and StarCraft. I had it explained to me that StarCraft is kind of to the same level as like the WWE. So like people, even if people don't watch wrestling, people know what wrestling is when you say WWE.
Right.
Like everyone has like some sort of pop culture reference point or touchstone point to go with it. And it was explained to me that that's very similar to StarCraft's relationship with Korea right now. And obviously it's been the kind of through the 90s, the early 2000s. I think you go back and look at like really old school OGN videos, and you have like the StarCraft pros wearing just like these ridiculously cool outfits, and they almost look like Power Rangers to some sort of extent. Whereas obviously now it's a very different style and much more like dressed down, but still kind of like anime-esque and how over the top it is. I always love, especially with OGN Masters before Riot came in and took the LCK broadcast over, when OGN had the broadcast rights for it, and how there's something that's just really hard to replicate about the themes, motifs, design aesthetic that OGN had built up for the Korean scene for League of Legends. And I think League and Riot got very lucky that a broadcaster as talented and as experienced as OGN took like such a strong interest in League of Legends, and then just like built almost like this mythology and lore around it.
Right. How did you first get into like the League of Legends space?
So I was in university and my roommate was telling me about this game, League of Legends, and I had never played, like I played Diablo, but that was about the only game that I ever played on a PC. Otherwise, I was strictly a console gamer. Like I'd been a console gamer my entire life. And I remember like PlayStation was my big one, but I had all the Nintendo consoles. My brother was the Xbox fan, so I didn't really like get into like the Halo craze unless I was playing it with friends, but my brother played it all the time. But I was like you into like the JRPGs and Final Fantasy, so I was like, gotta have my PlayStation. Final Fantasy 7 coming out, I'm like, yes, that is my game.
Awesome.
Oh yeah, I actually have like a Final Fantasy 13 tattoo.
Oh, that's awesome.
I've got 7 on my back as well. But going into League of Legends, I remember like being so upset that I couldn't move with the arrow keys.
Oh yeah, I know. That was so confusing for me too. I was like, wait, I can't move. Hello? And then I was like, oh wait, you have to click? Hello?
Exactly. I was like, what is this? This game is terrible, but super addicting. So I just kept playing it with my university friends, and kind of like word of mouth spread that way. And I remember watching, I think the very first World Championship, and I was a huge they were AAA. I can't even remember what it stood for anymore, but I believe that they were a European team, but they were like the AAA team. There was like CLG, Fnatic in it. So
Right. Yeah.
I started watching esports around then. I remember Nidalee was my first champion. I was like, she turns into a cat and she throws a spear. I'm in.
I remember Nidalee was so broken when I first started playing, and she was always so cool. Like I love when I first started playing League of Legends, I only played the female characters, and I normally would do that just like in general when I play games. I just was like, I love to see like strong female champions, just like them like absolutely wrecking.
I'm now just like a huge monster champion fan. One of my favorite champions is Alistar, and I love Cho'Gath, and I love Kog'Maw.
Oh, nice.
I love like all the little like yeah, exactly, all the weird looking ones.
I'm a Leona one trick right now.
I respect it.
Yeah, I kind of fell off. I played a lot of League like back in like season 5, 6, and then I stopped playing because it was just too toxic. I was like a toxic jungler for a bit, and like everyone would just flame me if we're losing the game. Like they're like, oh my god, jungler, like, they're not ganking my lane. I'm like, I'm sorry, there's only so much I could do, and I just quit the game because I was like, nah, too toxic for me. I'm going back to the, Stardew Valley kind of more RPG chill vibes.
You have to have like a detox period where you like bring in Stardew Valley.
Yeah.
Rinse it from your system.
Cleanse the toxicity. I guess like going into that, what's been some of like the major, I guess, like struggles or stuff that you faced throughout your career, being a woman in the gaming space? Like I know I've been like gotten tons of hate on just like League and other games just for being a girl. Like the second people find out you're a girl, they're just gonna start, going at you.
Yeah, I mean like any type of stereotype that you could expect, I've faced. I think it's hard because there's always like a spectrum here, and we spend so long kind of arguing or debating whether or not it exists, as opposed to putting that time into trying to fix the problems.
Right.
And for a long time, I didn't really have language for kind of some of the barriers that I was facing, or the hurdles that I had to go over. Now I would feel pretty confident in myself to identify something and be like, hey, you probably don't mean this, but that's kind of sexist what you just said there.
Yeah.
And I think like as more mainstream and how we're talking about, like the intersection of different social identities, that's kind of become more mainstream. It's kind of seeping over into gaming and then esports as an extension. So like things are definitely getting easier to talk about. Companies are getting more aware, maybe after a couple of lawsuits, but there's probably still a couple of lawsuits to go.
Just a couple.
Just a couple, but
yeah.
I have faced the gauntlet. If you could think about any type of hardship that someone could face in their career for potentially being gay or a woman, chances are that I've seen that.
Yeah, I guess what advice would you want to give to young women, LGBTQ women, like, watching this that, want to go into gaming or esports, but sort of see I guess, the kind of struggle that a lot of women face within the scene?
I think the most important thing, and whenever I kind of do like mentorship programs or work with women or non-binary people who want to get invested in the scene, it's always a conversation of like validating their own experiences, because a lot of them, we're all on kind of like our different journey about where we find the confidence to find our voice to stand up and put your finger and be like, this is what's happening to me. And I find that when I talk to a lot of individuals that kind of question themselves and they play it down and they almost like devalue their own feelings and thoughts. And it's like, no, you're smart, and like if you feel that something is happening to you, like that's just as valid, and you can give a name to it. So I think like the first and foremost thing is like you will experience hardship along gender or sexual orientation line, and it will happen consciously and unconsciously, and it sucks when it happens, but it doesn't mean that has to be like the barrier that you fall at. And then kind of like the next point of advice is, I went into gaming and esports in particular because I was super passionate about it. I loved everything about it. And ultimately, like for all of the hardships and the fallouts that I've had over the course of my career, I wouldn't do anything differently, and I would do it all over again because I truly love the industry. So I say that it's very much worth it, but don't feel that you have to like downplay your experience. Just like recognize,
100%.
yeah, that by first and foremost like putting a name to it, then that's how you help fix the problem.
Yeah. Something I do a lot on my channel is I talk about like mental health and kind of validating people's experiences, because everyone has their own struggles, like regardless of the situation you're born into or like what your gender, sexuality is, like everyone struggles. And I think like that, being able to just talk about that and like not feeling like you have to keep those experiences to yourself, even if it's just like like getting like not doing well in a game, and then just people saying something that might be like a little like sarcastic or not too nice. Like those experiences, even though they're really small, like can add up, and really especially when you're young, like it can be very like affect your experiences and sort of how you see the world and yourself in the future. And I think that having discussions like this, or having like mentors and people to talk to, and like safe spaces for like women, non-binary folks, and like esports and gaming, like I think that that's going to be increasingly more important the larger that esports grows, right? Because like proportionally the more that it grows, like there's always going to be people that aren't a fan of whoever in the gaming space for whatever reason, and we just have to find those safe spaces where we can kind of just vibe.
It's also just like, it's so surreal to me because I would like strongly feel that if anyone, like if people who would like come out and feel that they vehemently hate me, I'm like 100% positive that if they played a game with me or just had a conversation with me, they would not feel that way.
Yeah, you're so chill. Like I think I watched some like League of Legends casting in the past, so I've probably seen you, but I met you today, and like you seem awesome, like without any knowledge of anything else, and I think people are really quick to judge just because of their own biases and kind of how they want to see the world and see like women and within like the esports space. And because it was a previously very male dominated space and still is, right? Like I remember as a kid like being sad that there weren't any pro female players in like League of Legends or whatever I was watching at the time. And and I think there was a team that was like a pro league team that were all women, and they got a lot of hate, and it's just scary for girls because it's super male dominated, and like mostly I think not only the people with like working in the industry, but also players as well, right?
And it's a really hard space to navigate because, again, like the language around it is really hard, and it's not a black and white issue. It is
not at all, yeah.
a ton of nuance into it. I recently had a symposium with Kimberly Crenshaw, and if people like don't know who she is, she's an activist and a professor, and she's most notably recognized for coining the term intersectionality. Okay. And basically, the idea is that and again, it's getting easier because like these terms and language is getting more mainstream. But in our social identities, which would be like our race, our ethnicity, our sexual orientation, invisible disabilities, it's not just like the visible social or identities, it's also the invisible social identities, whether you're rich or poor, whether you're black or white, whether you are American or European and you're living in a different country, like if your country of national origin matches like where you are, and recognizing that intersectionality is a prism to look through our experiences and how they're impacted by the system. And she came up with this because she found that there was a woman, Amelia, that was trying to get a job. She's a black woman, and she was trying to get a job as I think it was a high-end, like computer-oriented, more like I'm going to say programmer, but kind of one of those white-collar office jobs. And she found that they wouldn't hire her, and she felt that it was because of race and gender, but then the company was able to go back, no, we do hire black people, but then she pointed out, well, when you hire black people, that therefore more of the blue-collar oriented labor jobs and not the higher up positions, and when you hire women, you're hiring them specifically for receptionist duties. So she was at the intersection of how her race and her gender were putting her at a disadvantage for a position that she was qualified for, and that's like the whole idea of it. It's recognizing in its context appropriate, and I always like to flip it for genders because I feel like guys get very defensive when we talk about women's issues all the time, and I do a lot of studying on statistics because I have a lot of these conversations to like try as like an outreach or like an empathy olive branch, if you will. And people find in nursing, which is a predominantly female dominant industry, that when they interviewed and talked to male nurses, that they felt that they were being discriminated against in terms of rising up or how they were treated in everyday and microaggressions. So when you flip the genders, and when there's predominantly one gender, whether it is male or female, or non-binary, but usually non-binary is like in a whole other marginalized category, that like prejudice and discrimination exists, and that's why intersectionality is context dependent. Most of the time, being a cis white heterosexual male will get you a lot of open doors, because we tend to notice open doors but only notice closed doors. But obviously if you switch the context, you make that cis white heterosexual male in like as a teacher in a preschool, suddenly he's probably going to be facing a lot of prejudice because there's this stereotype that men don't deal with children unless they're pedophiles. And that I think is very easy for people to understand. And so then when you flip it back into an industry like esports or gaming, which is very heavily male dominated, it's like, okay, well, we know that when these are flipped, you can experience discrimination or prejudice there. So hopefully now you can understand that you believe us when we say that we're experiencing discrimination and prejudice here.
Yeah, no, I think that the idea of intersectionality is super important to talk about, because I think like some of the bigger conflicts that people have, like what you said, is, everyone, like what I was saying before, like everyone has struggles. We don't know what the invisible struggles that people are going through, might be their socioeconomic status or like health problems, disabilities. You never know. So it's super important to be able to just sort of kind of just take a step back. And like, I'm like a very, I guess, non-confrontational person. So like if someone's upset at me or like saying something, I just try to take a step back, like understand what's happening from their perspective, because they don't know me, they just see who I am on the outside, they don't know my invisible struggles or anything like that. And I think that's like honestly the kind of the direction we need to go in. We need to be more patient and just kind of try to be more empathetic, right? Because we all have struggles, and everyone's experiences are valid, and even if you're a white heterosexual like cis male, like you still have struggles, and that's like they're all completely valid as well.
There's a really good analogy that one of my favorite writers, Deborah Francis White, talks about, and she talks about how like you have to think about it like climbing a bunch of stairs and then like getting to the very top of the room and looking around, and it's not about making the the individuals, and in a lot of cases it is the cis white het males, like to say that you don't deserve to be up there. Like no one's trying to say that. You worked just as hard, you climbed just as many stairs. It's just about recognizing that when you look around and you only see people who look exactly like you, maybe there's some closed doors on the way up that were open for you. And it's just about realizing that a Black woman might not have even had the chance to climb those stairs or the opportunity to even try to get up there because again, we notice the doors that are closed to us, but not the doors that are open.
No, that's a super good analogy. Yeah, I think that, you know, I guess, okay, so going into another question, how do you think that we can open those doors more for minorities and I guess specifically in the gaming space or just in general, like how do you think we can, you know, be in the gaming space, esports space, be more inclusive and accepting of people of like all different genders, sexualities, ethnicities, and so on?
I think it's not just about asking how we can, but it's also then about prefacing why we should, because there's also kind of this pushback of, you know, why does everything have to be so woke or about identity politics? And from a business perspective, because a ton of businesses are going through this right now, it's because every single measure and stat shows that it's better for business. There's a really famous story about when Microsoft were showing off the Kinect, and they were doing it in front of media, and as they're showing it off, they have a Black dude come up to demonstrate, and they realize in real time that because they had never tested it on someone as dark of a complexion as him, that the Kinect can't see him, and so their technology doesn't work. And that happened on a very, you know, think of how embarrassed, like the horror. I'm like, oh my god, just thinking about that gives me anxiety. Like that's
not good.
And you know, that's just like, that's one example of why it's important to have like different people in the room. But also when you're trying to sell something, you usually want to have your board or your company makeup reflect the company makeup of the consumers, so that way you can better give to your consumers. And like that's the easiest way that I can try to convince people, whether it's in gaming, whether it's in traditional business, whether it's in esports, about why it's important to diversify your company and why we should actually care about representation and diversity. It's like, we want the industry to thrive. We all want to make more money. When people make more money, it creates more jobs, it creates more opportunities for people to follow their passion. And that means that we need to cater to as many people as possible. And
100%.
Historically, we just haven't done that. And we can do better at that. So now then, like, flipping to the other part of it, of how do you then make spaces more inclusive? It's again, it's having conversations like this. But also I find the biggest thing is not being afraid to be wrong. I think right now there's like a sentiment around that you don't want to say the wrong thing, that you'll be canceled, that people will yell at you, that people always get so upset because all we see are like these two big extremes that are basically caricatures of each other. And it's like, no, it doesn't have to be like that. Like, it's actually quite, you know, I've never met anyone, and I've never myself been upset when someone asks me my pronouns or uses the wrong pronouns. You know what I mean? It's a very, oh no, these are my pronouns. And also, I don't know why people get so bent out of shape about that. I feel like it's very easy. Like, a dog comes along, you're like, oh, he's such a cute dog. And the owner's like, actually, it's a girl dog. You're like, oh, she's such a cute dog.
Yeah.
And then you go on. But again, I feel like there's this caricature that's been popularized on the internet, and the gaming community and the esports community. The internet's like our vein. It's like we are directly plugged into that. And I think that's what people are kind of expecting. That's almost like the stereotype that's been created, and they're so separate and so different. I feel like when people really hate me, they are reacting to a stereotype of something that doesn't really exist, rather than, again, sitting down, having a conversation, playing a game with me. Because I mean, like, it's fine to hate me, but I don't think I'm a very hateable person. You'd be like, she's kind of boring at dinner parties. I don't think I'm going to have her over again. I don't want to listen to the same stories anymore. But I've never had like someone kick me out of a dinner table and be like, no more.
No more chicken for you. Why do you think that there's so much like hate and toxicity that exists in like the gaming esports space?
I think that there's been a lot of really great things that have happened with the internet, but I also think that there's been a lot of underbelly things that have happened with the internet, and we kind of have to take the good and the bad. I'm not the only person who thinks this. There are hundreds of books on this. One that I really enjoy is called Antisocial, How Social Media Divided America. And obviously that's like through the lens of American politics. But I think first and foremost, you have to like back up and you have to think about the internet. When most people think about it, they think that it's like global, that like everyone is on the internet. And like, don't get me wrong, a lot of people are there, but there's a lot of barriers to entry that you need to consider that's then shaping the things that you're hearing about. Like if you look at this nebulous ball as the internet and you think that this is the voice of everyone, you need to consider that to even participate in speaking into this ball, you need to have a computer, you need to have a smartphone, you need to have an internet connection, you need to have free time. And that cancels out so much of the population, not just like globally, but also in America. And so when you think about this ball, and then it gets even more narrow. And if you want to use a word like echo chamber for that, you know, there's plenty of like buzzwords that you can attach to it. But I think that's like the first and foremost thing is that I think gaming thinks that it's having a much larger conversation, and they're not really realizing that the conversation that they're having is quite small to the people participating into it. And so I think gaming is actually much larger than the internet conversation thinks it is, but there's simply some gamers that don't go and have that conversation.
How do you think that people can start having these conversations, I guess, within like friends or within just like I don't know, like schools and stuff like that? I don't know.
I mean, I think access is getting easier because I love that you bring up schools. Obviously, there's a lot of different school programs, computer programs in general, whether that be like, I had a computer graphics design class in my high school, which is like pretty
awesome.
Unheard of, especially for how old I am. I'm 30, so this was like back in the early 2000s.
No way, you're 30? No.
I'm old. Like I bend over my knee cracks. I'm like, this
you're
is it.
Old.
I'm gonna die down here. I'm never getting back up. But getting more tech literate individuals. But in terms of like the larger like macro question of like how do we make spaces more inclusive? How do we get rid of like the stereotyped toxicity in gaming communities? I frankly think it will just happen naturally with time. Again, as more people are getting access, because social media and the internet didn't make a big majority voice stand out. It has a really good ability to amplify specific voices. Like it's really good at like amplifying everything rather than actually like homogenizing what people think about something.
Yeah.
And
it's like the Twitch culture with like people just spamming like, you know, an emote and like that's like whenever I would watch like a League of Legends like tournament or whatever, like it just everyone just spamming one emote like or like one, what is it, coffee pasta thing. I'm like, how is this like what? I didn't understand it before I got into Twitch culture, honestly.
It's actually like a really good example. Like Twitch is such a small fraction of like League of Legends Reddit. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
There's like 1 million users on the League of Legends Reddit, and like Twitch, even for like LEC broadcasts, is like 250,000. You know what I mean? Like it's a fraction of a fraction. And then when you take the League of Legends subreddit, it's like such a tiny fraction of League of Legends players. So I think that's like a really good way to almost show like the idea of like the echo chambers, where if you like see a sentiment in Twitch chat, you're like, oh yeah, everyone thinks that everyone thinks that we should just be saying these horrible things or just spamming like, poggers or keck W's all the time. And then you go to like Reddit, you see like all of these like, oh, everyone hates this champion, but then Riot will do like a global survey of like their entire player base, be like, nah, I mean like Reddit hates that champion, but everyone else seems that this champion is fine. So if you ever find yourself like, I don't get it, I see all the complaints on Reddit, but they won't do anything, well, chances are they've done their own surveys that have a much wider net than the tiny sliver that are the platforms that amplify kind of like these very specific voices. And it's not to say that those voices aren't important. It is to say though that you should recognize that they aren't the only voices.
It's not the only opinion that exists. Yeah, I think that the internet, it works in a way where it's sort of like the bandwagon effect, right? Where it's like one person has, you know, something to say like with a loud voice, or they have the platform to do so, or, you know, they have enough people to back them, and then just, you know, it it's really easy for things to start spreading because of that. And I've seen it not only like, you know, in like
I've
League of
lived
Legends
it.
games, but yeah. Yeah, no, 100%. Do you like how do you deal with that kind of,
Cry.
you know, like honestly, yeah. Like it's hard. Like I can't imagine with like just cancel culture and stuff like that, like the toxicity that exists on the internet. Like I don't even like know where I would start if that were to happen to me.
I mean, the only thing you can do is, and again, I get asked this a lot by like other young professionals in the industry, because it happens to everyone at some point.
Some point.
But first and foremost, it's like to validate again the experience that they have, and everyone can feel whatever type of way that they want to feel about it. It doesn't make anything right or wrong. But then ultimately, the only thing that you can do, because we haven't figured out some sort of system, is to just keep going. Like from a PR standpoint, it's like, buckle down, don't look at anything, keep going and saturate content, and then the attention span of whatever audience it is will kind of move on into the next thing.
Move on to the next thing, right.
But I think the most important thing, and kind of like the biggest difference that I've found from like G4 to Riot, is kind of the internal support for it, because you know, we don't really know what we're doing to people really when we expose, and there's been like some celebrities that have come out and talked about this, or politicians, when we expose to people to like that kind of bombarding all the time. But yeah, it's all you can really do is feel sad about it, continue on. Revenge or spite is the best revenge. Revenge is the best just, I don't know. I feel like I'm like 99% spite. People are like, why are you putting this together? Like, why are you doing this tournament, all this hard work? I'm like, I have to spite someone. I'm trying to prove someone wrong. I said I could do it, so I'm gonna do it anyway.
Yeah, no, totally. Like I think because I'm pretty new to, I started streaming like July of 2020, so I'm still pretty new to the sort of streaming space, and I haven't like had a ton of like hate, but I have had my fair share of like hate emails or people in my DMs. Just
why do people email?
I don't know, like just sending it to my business email.
I know, it's the strangest thing. I'm like, I would like, don't get me wrong, there are plenty of celebrities, presidents, politicians that I'm not a fan of, but I have never once like
sat down and emailed them like a whole like essay.
You're just like, what the?
Yeah, like how do people have time for this? Like, hello. Yeah, it's crazy. Just, you know, the internet's like it's a huge space, right? Like there's so many people. Like when I'm streaming, I don't, you know, I could have like, you know, I think like last night, like I got raided and there was like 300 people in my chat, and like that's 300 people like watching me. Day. Yeah, but it's just like it's you really forget like and then like that's not only like people are coming in, cycling through and stuff, and like, you know, your everything that you say is on the internet, like to stay technically, right? And I think it can be really scary for people. Like I have a lot of friends that like want to go into streaming and stuff, but they're, you know, don't want to use like their face, their, you know, their real name, obviously, of course, and stuff, just because of, you know, just the safety issues and the privacy and potential hate and all that. Like it's definitely a scary space. So I commend you for staying in the space for so long, and despite all the, you know, the stuff that you face. Like it's really
the weirdest experience I've had is because obviously like you, I've experienced like the emails, the DMs, like any type of platform. You just can't, they're like plugging into everything,
right?
But like having people say stuff to your face at events is really strange, and it happened to me. I was with another caster, Atlas from the LCK, and him and I were like just talking to each other, walking to stage, and it was I think it was like an IEM where the stage was actually located in the audience, and I had one person come up and he shakes Atlas's hand, because obviously we're not going to be unfriendly if people come up. We're going to assume that they want to meet us because we're the casters, and be friendly and cordial. And shakes Atlas's hand, shakes my hand. I can't remember what he said, but it was so bad that Atlas was like, why would you say that to someone's face? And then the guy just like turned and walked away, and then we had to go and sit on the analyst desk. And we had like 30 seconds before we cut to live. And I actually think if you go back and like, I think it's I Am Oakland, if I remember correctly, but like you come back and you cut, and I like look like I'm almost about to like burst into tears for like that entire analyst desk. It sucked. It was awful. But like, yeah, people do very strange things, and I just don't know why. I'm like, I don't know, when I'm watching like football or something and I just like hate a player, I just like turn to my buddy on the couch and like, I hate that guy.
We wouldn't go up to him like,
I know, I would
like, yo, you suck.
Why would I waste my time?
Yeah, I don't know. Like I really don't know to like why people, you know, do that. That's like something that really boggles me. And like, you know, because I guess I'm still pretty young. I'm only, you know, 22, and like, you know, I guess just from being in college and everything, I've kind of started to realize the world isn't as like, you know, sunshines and rainbows as you think it is when you're a kid, right? Like when you're a kid, I'm playing like video games and like, you know, escaping to these like magical worlds and stuff. And you kind of want the world that you're like the real world to be kind of like that too, right? And it's not, and it sucks, but yeah.
But I will say this, I do think that like, again, that's like a lot of negative, and then just like balance it off, because again, I just think it's like, it is nuanced, is that there's also like a lot of wonderful things, like all of my best friends are all guys that I've met gaming with them, and I would say that they are like, especially, and I think more people get this now after COVID because everyone went into lockdown, like they understand how virtual relationships can be just as meaningful as IRL relationships, because everyone basically was locked in and had to like experience through the Zoom calls or Skype calls, Discord calls. But yeah, like my Pokemon team, we are a very strange, eclectic group. There's like a fish scientist. There's a dude from Louisiana who sells tiles. We've got a high school teacher from Florida, a programmer. And,
that's awesome.
And me, and like the best of buddies, despite having like vastly different backgrounds and belief systems. And that's kind of like the magical of the industry and gaming, is that when we're playing games together, we can enjoy it.
It doesn't matter what your background is or what you do. Like you can just come together and enjoy the game. That's what I love about Twitch too, is like, you know, I have people from all over the world coming to chat with me, and you know, regardless of, you know, their own differences and stuff, we can all still like, you know, just sort of enjoy a time together to talk about mental health. Or I started doing like workout Wednesday streams, so we like all work out together. Or
I definitely need to do that. I have been way too
join on in.
Workout
Wednesdays 8 p.m. No, it's I feel that I made it my resolution this year to just be more active, because there's so many studies that talk about how physical and like mental health are intertwined. And I felt at the end of, because of COVID and just like the end of the year, my mental health was like, and like at the same time, I felt like my physical health was going down too. Wasn't working out as much, wasn't going outside. And I was becoming the gamer hermit that I've always been, but like my repressed gamer hermit. Like literally all of high school, I would just like play games, do homework. I didn't hang out with people. I had online friends and stuff, but like, you know, like it was always just like, you know, gaming and stuff was my safe space. It was the only thing I knew.
I definitely did not get this pale from like going outside and hanging out with friends. Okay, this is a Discord tan, if you will.
Discord tan. I love that. What are you playing now, or are you looking forward to any games?
So I play a lot of Pokemon Unite because I have a team of a bunch of over 30s with I don't know why. We're just like, this is probably unacceptable for us to play this children's game, but we do it anyway.
No, not at all.
But I'm also playing Outer Worlds. I missed it like the first time. It's an RPG. It's made from the same team, Obsidian, that did Fallout New Vegas. So if you're a fan of the Fallout series, basically like, I like to talk about like the spectrum of like RPG. This is good because you're an RPG player. So you have like Skyrim over here, and then you have like like BioWare's like Dragon Age kind of over here. Or actually no, I would say Outer Worlds over here, and then I put like Dragon Age in the middle. Like Skyrim is like the fantasy epic land. You can literally do whatever you want, but like the mechanics that you're playing around are really like the game mechanics of like combat, spells. Like if you want to get into the lore, you're basically reading books. You're reading like a lot of text. For Outer Worlds, you don't have like a lot of the same mechanics, the same depth as like a Skyrim, but what makes the Obsidian such a strong studio and such a beloved studio is their writing. And so if you're really into like the adventure lore role-playing element of RPG games as opposed to like the fantasy element, Outer Worlds is your game, because there's so many different, there's like a novel, it's a choose your own adventure, and you get to like select through, and that's like your primary mechanic is basically like talking to people. Like you can shoot people, but it's and then BioWare Dragon Age is kind of like the hybrid between them, where you have like a lot of lore that's being done through text channels, but you also have a bit more like mechanics that you're playing with, especially if it's like Dragon Age Origins and it's like an RTS top down. So Skyrim, Dragon Age, Outer Worlds, recommend.
Cool. Yeah. Yeah, I've been looking for more games to get into, because I played a lot of like back in the League of Legends and stuff, but I tend to not I guess I love like competitive games, but I'm an extremely competitive person. So when it comes to like PvP games, and I guess I'm not very good at FPS. I tried dabbling in Valorant a bit. I'm still never nailed that, but it's okay. So yeah, always looking for new games. I'm excited for the new Pokemon game. I think that's coming out. The
Arceus?
Arceus, right?
I think that's how you say
Zelda-esque game that's coming. Yeah, that looks pretty cool.
All of the things that I've like seen people say about it is that it's like super fun. And I'm a big Pokemon fan, so I know there's like the crowd that are really upset that like Pokemon hasn't changed the formula at all. And I know that there was like a whole big outrage that the game doesn't look very nice. It looks like very dated. But I'm like, come on, guys, it's dog fighting for children. Like,
yeah,
you know exactly what you're getting when you play a Pokemon game, and that's exactly what I want when I play a Pokemon game. I'm ready to take my starter Pokemon and just go.
Yeah, no, that's just what you want. I guess moving on to like a question away from gaming, or I guess related to gaming is, I guess in your experience working in the esports space, what does it take to put on a tournament? And I guess small scale, larger scale.
A lot. Running tournaments is very, very, very difficult and almost very rarely cost efficient. I think when people, because from a traditional sports background, you're getting a lot of money from the maintenance of the stadiums themselves. The cities will pay for the stadiums. You have ticket sales, you have drinks and food sales, and usually there will be like a deal there. You have the ability to sell physical merchandise. For an esports event, when putting on a tournament, especially if it's in person versus virtual, you are never making money. That is like specifically a marketing. You will be lucky if you break even, and you're probably not paying your volunteers very well. But it takes a ton and very competent TOs, and shout outs to all the incredible TOs that put the tournaments on. I think that what's cool about esports is that it has such a grassroots spirit. And I think that's why, no shade to Overwatch. I love Overwatch. I really want it to continue to do well. Hopefully with Microsoft taking over Activision Blizzard, that Overwatch 2 will be a much stronger product. But I do think that kind of shows is like a really good case study of what happens when you move a little bit too fast before an esport or a grassroots scene is ready to stand up on its own. And when you inject all of that money in, but you haven't worked those muscles to figure out how to use it effectively or really stand up, I think that's how a lot of money goes to waste. And you kind of get this bloated product that eventually kind of keels over or has to change hands, which is why I think a lot of teams are being bought up specifically by Chinese owners or Chinese markets, because Chinese esports market is obviously very, very, very strong and very healthy economically.
Definitely.
So comparatively to, I think, what Riot got very lucky with, and this is also like Riot did a lot of things very well, but they also got incredibly lucky again that they had a game that was so popular again in a market, Korea specifically, that already had such a strong endemic esports scene that kind of created the blueprint about how to do this on a Western scale, because it is a Western company, and had more of that natural, authentic muscle where it already knew how to stand before having a ton of money pumped up onto it. Whereas now, because Riot has kind of set the spectacle, if you will, for especially the Western market, now you have, you know, the Call of Duty League comes in and they throw so much money, but you don't necessarily see the returns because the scene wasn't built naturally. And so
I see.
Tournament organizers are very important at every level, but especially the grassroots level, because you don't get the Riot World Championships of the world without those grassroots movements, because everything has to be built on top of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can't even imagine. Like I haven't really, obviously I'm not a TO, but I've helped like organize like little tournaments within like the sort of the college scene, and it's always so there's so much that goes into planning it, especially like, let alone like, you know, online tournament, like in-person tournaments. I can't even imagine, because I think like we're maybe trying to do like a kind of, I made like a streaming kind of club at USC, and we're trying to do like a Valorant tournament. Probably will be online, but I guess like what advice would you give to like, this is, you know, with the emerging, I guess, popularity of collegiate esports, what advice would you give to, you know, to the folks that are involved in that, and organizing events and sort of, I guess, growing in that space?
It's first and foremost checking for resources to help do a lot of the lifting. So when I worked over in the OPL, it was really important. Every Riot office kind of has its own agenda or planning, and the OPL and the Oceanic office felt very strongly about high school and university clubs in particular. And we kind of thought like, you know, okay, if we want League of Legends to be a generational sport, then obviously you gotta get them while they're young. And to do that, you need to move into the education system. So there was like a really big push for, you know, how do we convince schools to open up a League of Legends club? Like, how do you even, and we decided to do it through sportsmanship and teaching sportsmanship and online security, and making kind of like a lesson plan, and then presenting it, our head of this team then presented it to, I think, New South Wales school education board, and actually got it approved. But at the university level and the high school level, my job was to create resources for the classes to use. So if you were a teacher or a college student and you wanted to make a club, that we made sure that you could go to our website, download a PDF file that would have things like pre-made sign-up sheets, tournament brackets that are easy to customize, a bunch of different like language or educational packets that you could take to your school board if you didn't have resources like a computer lab to try to give like some of the positive or the stats of trying to convince people, you know, like trying to do a lot of the legwork just to make it easier for the people on the ground, the students, the teachers, the guidance counselors, whoever it was that wanted to kind of helm this, so that they didn't have to kind of start from nothing and figure out, okay, I want to run this this Valorant tournament. How do I even convince my university or my school to allow me to use the computer lab for this? And because you walk in there like, so it's a game where you shoot each other, but
like, well,
so I would first and foremost check for resources that have already been made by the developers themselves. Chances are that they exist. And then second of all, it's find a like-minded group of individuals that want to have some pizza parties and stay up really late and pull out your hair, but have a really good time. I know that doing grassroots tournaments have been some of my favorite memories with friends. So Godspeed and good luck.
What resources do you know of that exist already?
So I'll try to retweet them. I'll go dig them out of my thing. But I know that I've put out the resources several times that have like packets of things about like, again, like sign up sheets, like a standardized rule set that you get access to, that you can then apply for your tournament. I think there's really good sites now. How do you say it? Challenge? I'm probably saying it weird. It basically looks like challenge, but it has like an O in it that does, you can make tournament brackets yourself. There's a good friend of mine named Chopsky who does, he created open source, what's the word, user interface, where basically you like download this program and then you can input what teams you want in scores. So if you wanted to run like a standings or a scoreboard that would change automatically, that it's like much easier than trying to edit a bunch of text files. I think it's like kind of looking to your own grassroots community for the tools that people have built to try to build your own stuff. And there's like a lot of really great people out there who's like I can't sing Chopsky's praises enough, especially if you're trying to run like a small tournament. He's built like guides about how to set up a very low tech broadcast studio, like basically so you could run a tournament off of a 10 pad if you want, and like keying all the macro keys there. So
oh wow, yeah, I you forget, like even like going to school, you forget there's like tons of resources to help you with, like you don't need to start from scratch, right?
Lots of YouTube videos.
Lots of YouTube, like with the internet, like you can find anything out there. Like I think that's something that we forget about. Like I even forgot about when I'm organizing this tournament. So I'm like, what are we doing? Yeah. I guess, is there anything else you wanted to talk about? We'll probably have like wrapping up in like, a few minutes.
Yeah, so I guess if I could like impart any wisdom and kind of like speaking on like the platform and kind of like panel conversation and umbrella that we're under, and it being like LGBTQ, I just want to like remind people that there is a lot of like, I'm not gonna bullshit people, there's a lot of bigotry and hatred still out there, and you will find that like specifically against your identity, like no matter kind of what spectrum that you're on or however you identify. But that said, there's also like a lot of good, and I think it's just about trying to cut through that and find your own community, because that is something that is also really great about gaming. I found a incredible group of individuals and friends, and for like all of the hardships that I faced to get to this point, again, I would do it all over again, because the people that I've met on the way and the experiences that I've had on the way have been nothing but fantastic, and have made me the person that I am today, and I feel pretty good about the person that I am today, so that's nice. I don't like wake up and like hate myself, so highly recommend. The old classic, it gets better.
Yeah, it gets better. Just gotta push through, keep on gaming. All right. Well, thank you so much for being on the show, Frosk. It was a pleasure meeting you and getting to chat.
No, thank you so much. Do you want me to disconnect from the call?
We can. I mean, is there any socials you wanna plug or?
Oh, until now I could spell them anyway, and I'm not on them, so no.
Okay. Well, if you guys want to follow me, you can find me at Emma Meili on Twitch, or Emma Meili Twitter, Emma.Meili on Instagram. Thank you so much for having us, GGP. And see you guys next time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.